Expansive History of European Opera, Part 22 of 34. Contemporaries of Verdi and Wagner, Part 3. In Italy and Greece. Wagner and Verdi were born in the same year 1813. Wagner lived to 1883 and Verdi to 1901. These lifespans indicate which other composers were contemporaries. In Italy. In the second half of the 19th century, one man dominated the Italian opera scene, Giuseppe Verdi. Few other Italian composers were able to attract much limelight away from Verdi. Of those who did, the best known is Amilcare Ponchielli. Ponchielli's solitary triumph, La Gioconda, has been a perennial vehicle for dramatic singers ever since its premiere in 1876. His other once successful operas including Liturni have disappeared from opera house repertories. Amilcare Ponchielli lived from 1834 to 1886. He was an Italian opera composer, best known for his opera La Gioconda. Although in his lifetime Ponchielli was very popular and influential in introducing an enlarged orchestra and more complex orchestration, the only one of his operas regularly performed today is La Gioconda. The opera plot. Enzo recognizes Laura, Alviz's wife, as a past love, just as Gioconda begins to fall in love with him. Gioconda agrees to yield to Barnaba if he will save Enzo from death. When he is released, Enzo flees with Laura. Desolate, Gioconda prepares to submit to Barnaba but instead stabs herself. Thwarted, the evil Barnaba reveals to the dying Gioconda that he has killed her mother. Next, the aria Cielo e March from La Gioconda by Amilcare Ponchielli, 1876. Sung by Luciano Pavarotti. We hit quite the best patch in the opera. As Enzio waits for Laura, he sings his first big set piece, a fine aria and a real test for any tenor with its long legato lines and a lot of stuff pretty high up. Excerpt 1. I Liturni, 1874, by Amilcare Ponchielli. The Italian libretto of I Liturni is by Antonio Ghislanzoni, based on the historical poem Konrad Wallenrod written by Polish poet Adam Mickiewicz. It premiered at La Scala in Milan on the 7th of March 1874. The opera was extremely well received when it opened, and a second, final version with additional material was performed again a year later, also to good reviews. It continued to be performed in the last decades of the 19th century in Cremona, Trieste, Brescia, Rome, Turin, Buenos Aires, Montevideo, Chicago, and a single noteworthy Russian performance in 1884 at the Imperial Bolshoi Kameny Theatre in St. Petersburg with the title Aldona. After a three-night run in 1903 at La Scala, where the casting was particularly poorly reviewed, I Liturni was not performed again until 1979. Since then, it has been revived in Chicago, 1981, 1983 and 1991, Toronto, 1981, Cremona, 1984, Vilnius, 1991, and Trakai, 2009. Musically, this is an excellent opera, probably worthy of being among the top 100 greatest operas ever. I would even make the case that it is probably Ponchielli's best opera, even considering the admittedly mixed bag masterpiece that is La Gioconda. Plot-wise and libretto-wise, however, it is dreadful, and the story and libretto of Gioconda, by Boito, has light years on this thing. Opera plot. Lithuania and Marienburg, Germany, 14th century. Walter is the husband of Aldona, the sister of Arnoldo, a Lithuanian prince, and he has not seen her in 10 years as of Act 1, during which time he has tricked the Teutonic Order into believing him to be a German knight. He has done this in order to sabotage a climatic battle between the Teutonic Order and the Lithuanians because of the betrayal of Vitoldo, a Lithuanian who becomes a judge for the Teutonic Order. Aldona comes out of the ruins of a cloister, where a battle between the Lithuanians and Teutonic knights is taking place nearby. She meets Walter, and hopes for a happy future of love, but Walter has been betrayed for causing the defeat of the Teutonic knights by the Lithuanians. Later, back in the castle, Albano tells Walter that a secret court has sentenced Walter to death. Rather than falling into enemy hands, Walter drinks poison and exults in the victory of the Lithuanians, asking Albano to give Aldona his last farewell. Aldona arrives, and Walter dies in her arms. The divine spirits of Lithuania arrive to welcome the glorious warrior's soul. The next excerpt. Arnaldo and Albano, old bard, urge Valenrod, Walter in disguise, not to betray them. He entrusts them both to Albano and orders them to be imprisoned for their own safety, saying, for the benefit of the crowd, that there will be executions tomorrow, but Vitoldo has recognized Aldona. Excerpt 2. Suddenly, bells toll, the battle is lost and the Germans flee in terror. Walter orders Aldona to pray for him in hiding and that Arnaldo will head the troops by nightfall. The second excerpt from I Lithuani. Soldiers and women express their thoughts, while Vitaldo, who is now revealed as the leader of an inner circle of knights, the Franksjuge or free judges, who are a self-appointed court of summary justice, turns up with his men and tells them that he has now discovered who Valenrod, Walter in disguise, really is and that he is going to Marienburg to kill him. Aldona overhears them, and resolves to go to Marienburg herself to try to save her husband. Excerpt 3. Few Italian composers were able to attract much limelight away from Verdi. Of those who did, another is Arrigo Boito, 1842–1918. Composer, novelist, librettist, poet, critic, and conductor, Arrigo Boito was one of the cultural luminaries of late 19th century Italy. Initially an ardent Wagnerian, he was converted to the music of Verdi, for whom he wrote 2 libretti, the basis of his reputation today. On the whole his music is less accomplished than these libretti, but there is one great exception, Mephistopheles, arguably the most ambitious setting of Goethe's Faust. In 1863 Faccio commissioned Boito to write the libretto for his opera I Profughi Fiamminghi, a work that prompted Boito to declare that Faccio would cleanse the altar of Italian opera now stained like the walls of a brothel, a hot-headed remark that Verdi took personally, causing a rift that endured for years. In 1866, shortly after Austria had ceded Venice to the embryonic Kingdom of Italy, Boito and Faccio joined Garibaldi for the final push to achieve complete Italian unification. After 3 months of posturing, Boito left for Poland, where he completed Mephistopheles in 1867. In 1879 Verdi and Boito were reconciled and began one of the greatest writer-composer relationships in operatic history, producing the triumphs of Verdi's Otello and Falstaff. Mephistopheles, revised 1875, by Arrigo Boito. The premiere at La Scala, conducted by the 26-year-old composer, was a catastrophe. It was badly sung and shambolically conducted, and when the show dragged on past midnight, critics and audience conceded defeat. By the time the curtain came down at 1:30 a.m. the theatre was half empty. The Scala management divided the opera into 2 parts, just like the poem, they pleaded, and spread the second performance over 2 nights. This did little to help and Boito withdrew the score from production before the third performance. During the ensuing period of disillusionment he devoted himself to writing libretti for other composers including Catalani and Ponchielli, and to translating existing works, including Tristan and Ruslan and Ludmila. But in 1875, 7 years after its first performance, a revised and greatly abbreviated Mephistopheles was received in Bologna as enthusiastically as the original had been condemned. Opera plot. Act 1. After a prologue in which the devil wagers God that he can win Faust's soul, The elderly philosopher is followed by a friar who reveals himself to be the devil. He restores Faust's youth and urges him to sign a contract selling his soul in return for a single moment of divine happiness. Act 2. Mephistopheles flirts with Marta while Faust, introducing himself as Enrico, courts her friend Margarita. She agrees to meet him later, and Faust gives her a draught to keep her mother asleep so that they will not be disnegation-turbed. Mephistopheles takes Faust to witness the witches' Sabbath, Walpurgis night, during which he sees a vision of Margarita in chains. Act 3. Margareta, who is deranged, has been imprisoned for poisoning her mother with Faust's draught, and for drowning her son by Faust. He visits Margareta in her cell and offers to free her, but she rejects his help and, after announcing the devil, who makes a late appearance beside Faust, she dies resolute in her Christian faith. Act 4. Mephistopheles transports Faust to ancient Greece where he meets Helen of Troy, Helena. Faust offers his love, and they leave together, disappearing from sight. Epilogue. Disillusioned and longing for death, Faust repents. He is pitied by God who, regardless of Mephistopheles' demands for his soul, welcomes him into heaven. The next excerpt. The duet with Margarita borders on opera gold. Excerpt 4. The next excerpt. When Helen and company join in with Faust's love song to Helen, it becomes so passionate in its own way. Followed by the love duet, almost haunting and ever shimmering, and when taken to its conclusion perhaps the most adult melody in the entire piece, it is probably the opera's finest passage. It continues until the end of the act when Helen and Faust make love in her boat which floats away into dreamland. Excerpt 5. In Greece. Spiridon Zindas or Spiridiones in 1812–1896 was a Greek composer and guitarist. He composed 6 operas. Premieres from 1855 to 1895. In the 1840s, Zindas began to compose concert arias and songs in Demotic Greek, a contribution that eventually resulted to the creation of the opera called O Υποψηφιος, the parliamentary candidate, in 1867. This was the first full-scale opera based on a libretto in Greek and the only one of Zindas' operas that exists today. Its seemingly comic plot is a severe criticism regarding the living conditions of the Ionian Islands' rural society, against the morality of the indigenous politicians, both during the period under British occupation, 1815 to 1864, and after it. Zindas also composed other operatic works, the most notable of which was Anna Wintour, based on Dumas' The Three Musketeers, which is the earliest use of a Dumas work in the modern Greek theatre. It is believed that many of his works were destroyed during the 1943 Luftwaffe bombing of the Municipal Theatre of Corfu. I cannot find any excerpts. Pavlos Kara (1829–1896) was a Greek composer, one of the leaders of the Ionian art music school and the first to create national operas and national songs on Greek plots. He composed 11 operas. He was one of the most popular and widely performed composers in 19th-century Greece, while achieving a considerable reputation in Italy. He followed closely the developments in European opera, lent an ear to artistic modernism and constantly updated his compositional practice. In his musical style Italian influences are evident, mainly from Verdi's middle period and the late bel canto. However, his musical idiom is distinguished for its unique personal style, and for his efforts to bring Greek national coloring in his creations. The Risorgimento was the political and social movement that consolidated different states of the Italian peninsula into the single state of the Kingdom of Italy in the 19th century. In 1850, in the peak of the Risorgimento, the young Pavlos Kara moved to Milan, the operatic capital of Europe, then under Austrian occupation, in order to specialize in his music studies. Mentored by Francesco Luca, the powerful Italian music publisher, Cara made his debut as an opera composer in August 1852 at the Carcano, with Dante Bis, an opera in 3 parts to a libretto by Serafino Torelli. The work, which seems to have annoyed the Austrian police by its political connotations, deals with the Italian national poet Dante Alighieri, his unfulfilled love for Beatrice Portinari, his political activities and the writing of the Divine Comedy. 1853 would bring a great success to the young composer, the 3-act opera Isabella d'Aspano, which was presented at the San Giacomo Theatre of Corfu, followed by a triumphant series of performances at the Milanese Carcano, April 1854 and March 1856. Cara's success in the Milanese stages was crowned with the production of the grand opera La Rediviva, in 3 acts. The work was received with enthusiasm when it premiered at the Carcano, January 1856, a success that was continued at the Teatro Comunale of Como, January 1857, and at the San Giacomo of Corfu, December 1857. With dreams of founding a national music and of becoming the first Greek national composer, Cara was repatriated from Milan in 1857 and settled in Zante. There he composed his first national opera, the 4-act Marco Bozzari, 1858-60, an excerpt will follow. It is considered Cara's most famous work and the most popular Greek opera during the 19th and early 20th centuries, with a record of more than 45 different stagings. The work, initially composed to an Italian libretto written by Giovanni Cicciolippi, was soon translated and performed in Greek, often causing the audience's enthusiasm in the theatres where it was presented. Marco Bozzari was a real-life hero. I don't have the opera plot, but here is an account of his bravery. Marcos Bozzaris, 1788–1823, was a Greek general and hero of the Greek War of Independence and captain of the Soviets. Bozzaris is among the most revered national heroes in Greece. In 1821, 39 years before the composition of the opera named after him, Bozzaris took part in the revolution against the Ottoman Empire. At the outbreak of the Greek War of Independence, he distinguished himself by his courage, tenacity and skill as a partisan leader in the fighting in western Greece, and was conspicuous in the defense of Missolonghi during the first siege of the city. On the night of the 21st of August 1823 he led the celebrated attack on Karpenisi by 350 Soviets, against around 3,000 Ottoman Albanian troops who formed the vanguard of the army with which Mustafa Pasha, the Pasha of Shkodër, modern northern Albania, and advanced to reinforce the besiegers. Bozzaris' men ambushed the enemy camp and inflicted serious casualties, but Bozzaris was shot in the head and killed. Bozzaris was buried with full honors in Missolonghi. After the Ottomans captured the city, in 1826, his grave was desecrated by Ottoman Albanian groups. Here is an excerpt from Marco Bozzari. Sorry, no description and no translation. Excerpt 6. A special place in his operatic creation is held by Marathon's Salamis, an ambitious opera in 4 parts, composed circa 1886–8, combining a classical theme with a proto-impressionist musical idiom and a hint of Wagnerian unifying procedures. Cara never saw this last opera on stage, for it was first presented in Athens 115 years after its composition by the Greek National Opera. This little-known Greek opera, based on an Italian libretto by Memnon Martsokis, revolves around the ruse of in the heady days of Greece's victory over the Persians at Marathon. Fedima, a Persian, falls in love with Alexander, the Macedon warrior. She has followed him all the way to Greece, but he abandons her. As she searches for him in Athens together with her child, the product of their affair, Alexander announces to the Athenians that Xerxes wishes to make peace. Themistocles tells him that the Greeks would rather die than live as slaves. Myrto, Themistocles' daughter, falls instantly in love with Alexander. Fedima is heartbroken, but Themistocles helps her get back on her feet. Before the Battle of Salamis, Fedima enters the Persian camp and convinces Xerxes that the Greeks have lost all hope. Shortly after, Alexander attacks Fedima with a dagger, calling her a snake that has bitten the bosom that gave her life. As she lays dying, she tells him that she did not betray Themistocles. The general himself had sent her to Xerxes to put him off the scent. Remorseful, the Macedonian warrior sinks the dagger into his own heart. The Greeks triumph. Themistocles, together with Myrto and Fedima's child, see Alexander dead and the young Persian woman dying. Fedima tells them that she is happy to die beside the man she loves and that her child finally found a father, as Greece has won. Here are two excerpts from Marathon Salamis, but I do not have descriptions nor translations. The first excerpt is particularly interesting because it starts as melodrama. Spoken word against a background of full orchestration develops into a mezzo singing accompanying the spoken soprano, developing into a sole mezzo singing alone followed by full chorus. The first excerpt. Excerpt 7. The second excerpt. Excerpt 8.